It's the East County Friday Football Review. I'm Ramon Scott of East County Sports, and I'm joined by Adam Paul of EC Preps, and we're going to go over last week's games and talk about some of next week's matchups. We got league play started, Adam, with some great games, including one game that we're going to kind of save the best for last in the big showdown out at Valley Stadium last Friday night. But I thought we'd kick it off right away and talk about the number one team in the county, the Helix Highlanders, mostly because Helix star Elelion Noah last week in the 65-14 win over El Capitan left the game in the second quarter with an ankle sprain. Noah scored on an 11-yard touchdown run before exiting the game. Adam, the injury isn't considered serious, but Noah doesn't need necessarily to return this week or next if he needs to heal up a little bit. They've got plenty of weapons. They scored 16 points before the offense even made its way onto the field last week.
Yeah, it seems like they scored pretty much every single way you could possibly think of, except for the special teams punt return and kickoff return. You know, they had a pick six, they had a safety, they had an onside kick, scoop and score, a blocked punt. Like you said, the defense scored all the points before the offense could even get there. Could show, put their stamp on the game. It sounded like, like you said, Elion Noah or Fato Noah, he got hurt. Luckily, it doesn't sound like it was super serious. Just an awkward fall. A defender fell on him. It sounded like he was on crutches. Obviously, he didn't return. Like you said, he doesn't have to play necessarily this week or next week, I don't think. So yeah, it's good that it's good to get the other guys into the game for Helix, just because that you want to get those guys battle tested for the upcoming rest of the season, including playoffs and stuff.
Well, it was a block punt by Sam Stewart, recovered by Marvin Locke in the end zone. And then John Carroll had that 33-yard interception return. Carroll, a linebacker, also had 8 tackles, including a pair of sacks. And you mentioned the scoop and score. Was it shoop and score? Dominic Shoop returning an onside kick, 51 yards for a touchdown. And how about senior place kicker Elijah Lang, Mr. Popularity? He was the homecoming king at halftime. Adam, Valhalla, pretty good performance, I'd say, actually, considering that bad start. Josh Meredith made his first appearance. The transfer caught 5 passes, including a touchdown.
Okay.
And senior Colette Lindsay rushed for 100-yard. Sophomore quarterback Tommy Logan, 6 for 7 passing, including a touchdown. Keegan Baker, he kind of came out of the game after scoring a touchdown. Really just a tremendous workload, and going up against these harder-hitting teams can really take its toll.
They played El Cap. You talked about Valhalla. Are we on the Valhalla game now?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Adam. I still wanted to cover with you looking ahead. Sorry about that, Helix and Valhalla. But as far as El Cap is concerned in that game, Adam, with Helix, I know that Wickhauser threw for a couple of touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, 160 yards against Helix, and Savion Yokley. Donnie Green caught the scores. Yokley had 3 receptions for 78 yards in that game, Adam. Overwhelming performance. Sorry about the confusion, brother.
No, it's all right. They did their best. Unfortunately, Helix is just such a major buzzsaw. They can, obviously they did. They can obviously show they can score any way and at will. And unfortunately, it didn't matter who was on that field, whether it be Valhalla or El Cap. It just wasn't. It was a blowout by half, and the onslaught was on from there.
Maybe it's just what you guys have been talking about these last 2 weeks with me in these games. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not interested, but when the scores are over, I'm kind of running these games together. And of course, this week, El Capitan. We're talking about the Helix El Capitan game, and they're playing Steele Canyon. I mean, expecting another lopsided game, another game that, I'm certainly going to lose interest in early in the first half, just hoping that, that El Capitan can do something early and impress us. No disrespect to what's going on. So,
Yeah,
how I feel about it. And maybe that, that's my bad, but that's just the way it feels to me.
It's hopefully, I hope El Cap, that obviously they still have a game left with Valhalla. God, you don't ever want to see a team go 0-10, especially with the caliber of talent that is on El Capitan, as that the Vaqueros have. Like you said, Donnie Green, Wickhauser, Yoakley, Grassmick, among others. Yeah, you feel for them, and so hopefully, next week they can, whenever they play Valhalla, that should be a good game, I think.
Well, let's talk about them a little bit. I already covered it from a Valhalla perspective, like that, kind of going, over their highlights in that game against Grossmont. But
I go over them again.
Yeah, we could. Just always do a double take, do a second take. I always pride myself on not screwing up, but that one was royal. But still, right. Adam, Grossmont, somewhere over the last year, Adam, and I know how it happened because you and I. We study the metrics too much, and then we get criticized for studying the metrics. But it's obvious that somewhere in the metrics over the last year, despite the fact that Granite Hills thumped Grossmont on their own field last year, Grossmont, they played tough opponents. They've been winning, maybe because of Granite Hills has those 2 losses, but somewhere Grossmont passed Granite Hills, not only in the computer polls, but in the media poll as well. So Granite Hills going to, look to get their revenge this week. But Grossmont last week certainly looked good in their win over Valhalla. Senior Jamie Odom, 378 yards and 6 more touchdowns. What a performance by Grossmont.
Yeah, he threw for 4 touchdowns and ran for a couple more. Grossmont piled up almost 500 total yards. Brody Schicker caught 6 balls for 133 yards, including a 70-yard touchdown. And then the ground, Robert Tucker, who is one of the probably the more complete backs in all the county. He can catch out of the backfield and also run the ball. Obviously, caught four passes for 84 yards and a touchdown. Game. I think it was close for a while, and then Grossmont just kind of turned on the afterburners and went from there. The good thing, though, that in this game, Valhalla got some players in the game that hadn't played all year, and they their quarter, what looks like to be their quarterback of the future, Tommy Logan. He's only a sophomore. Was 6 of 7 passing for 52 yards and a touchdown. That bodes well for the Norsemen. Possibly this year. I mean, we'll see. Pillsbury, he's deemed the quote unquote game manager, and just from talking to people that were at this game and watching a little of the Orange Nation broadcast on YouTube, Tommy Logan looked pretty good. He could throw it, he could sling the ball a little bit, and I think that bodes well for the Norsemen, so that it's not just the Keegan Baker show. Because if you get in that rut of doing one thing out of only one thing, they're going to key on Keegan and stack the box with 8 men. Josh Meredith, who made his debut for Valhalla, caught 5 passes for 68 yards and a touchdown. Coletti Lindsay ran 8 times for 100 yards. So that, like I said, it's not just Keegan Baker doing everything for Valhalla.
Yeah, and also mention for Grossmont, you mentioned Tucker and his touchdown, but also Max Max Cadwallader scored a touchdown for Grossmont in that game, as did Chris Cherzan on those touchdown passes. So it was 4 passing touchdowns for Odom and 2 rushing as part of that big performance as Grossmont got the comfortable win against Valhalla.
Yeah, it's just one of those things again that Grossmont took the lead and turned on the afterburners and went from there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, Adam. West Hills, it looks lopsided on the scoreboard, but it was 27-0 over El Cajon Valley. And, I think it was like 13-0 at the end of the first half and 27-0 final. So touchdown a quarter. El Cajon certainly wanted to score, I know, in this one. And Adam, West Hills, all of a sudden, they're in a pretty good position. Quietly, they've worked their way up to a 4-2 record and will be playing in a big game this Friday night. All of a sudden, it's the game of the season because they went out and did their job against El Cajon Valley. This is going to be a championship impacting game this week. Cole Klingerman, another good night for him, and he's really doing well for this team.
Yeah, he had 2 touchdowns to go with his 80 yards and 3 catches. Gerardo Hernandez, 3 of 5 for 64 yards and the 2 touchdowns. And Braden Oberg, 2 of 3 for 34 yards and another touchdown. I think they, I wouldn't say that this was a quote unquote trap game. It was just a game that West Hills, had to make sure that their guys didn't get hurt, and so forth. And, they did what they did. And obviously 27-0. The defense sounded like they came up big with the shutout, obviously. And again, it was mainly they got, the big thing, they got the win. But the other big thing again was nobody, from what I read and sounded like, that nobody got hurt because, like you said, they have the big game on Friday night.
Yeah, and for the Braves, they're going to go into a game against Castle Park next week, but they did get a decent rushing performance from Demarius Hyde, who rushed for 49 yards in the game, and Clarence Johnson caught a couple of passes, 2 passes for 22 yards. Hyde has 475 yards rushing this season, and the Braves are taking undefeated Castle Park next week. So at least they played a tough opponent, and they'll be ready for that. And I know West Hills is certainly ready for their game. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. Meanwhile, Monte Vista picked up an important win for them, defeating Chula Vista, Adam, 34-17. And this one was in Spring Valley, and Isaiah Gardner had a big night.
Yeah, he said he had a big night, 184 yards on 24 carries and 3 touchdowns. His big night helped propel the Monarchs to the win, and also the big milestone victory for Coach Ron Hamamoto, who with the win, is his 229th career victory, which ties him with former Morse legendary coach John Shacklett for 4th all time in San Diego CIF section history. He's Hamamoto. He's been around. This is his 34th year coaching, and he's what's really another cool thing about him is that he's the only coach in section history to lead 4 different schools to title games. Obviously winning with University of San Diego High School in 1994, and of course a couple of years Monte Vista when they defeated San Diego High in that big Division IV clash. And of course he was right. He also has 2 runner-ups with Rancho Bernardo in 2001, a couple runner-ups with RB in 2001, Lincoln in 2010, and then prior with Monte Vista in 2013, which the late, our friend Bill Dickens and myself were at that game, and that was the game that they lost 7-0 in the rain, if I recall. And the play that won it was the only pass of the game for I believe it was Escondido that they played. Excuse me. Yeah, so chew on that one. You know, hats off to Coach Hamamoto. Again, this is another big win. This is another big win for Monte Vista. They get back on track. Because Chula Vista, who's now 0-7. Obviously, you didn't want to lose to the Spartans, and that game was close for a while because I think it was 13 or something at half. Is that right, Monte?
Yeah, senior quarterback Ruben Silva had a 40-yard touchdown with 1 minute left in the first quarter. Junior wide receiver Cajon Shingleton had a touchdown reception to extend their lead to 13-3, but Chula Vista had battled back to get back in the game, but then it was Gardner that looked so good in wrapping that one up.
Yeah, so obviously in the second half, it sounds like Monte Vista behind Gardner and company, and then the defense, stepped up and they made the adjustments, whatever it was at half, and stopped the Spartans, and obviously, they win by almost 30 points out there in Spring Valley. Again, it's a game that Monte Vista, I think, had to have, get back on the winning track as they prepare for their big game on Friday night as well.
Hey, I mean, they're playing their, city rival, if you will, their Spring Valley rival in Mount Miguel. And, even though Mount Miguel is certainly rated a little bit higher right now, this one is at Monte Vista. So I think that's a bit of an equalizer, and I think that makes it kind of an interesting game. And I also think it's interesting that Monte Vista's kind of, done better in this series than Mount Miguel over the last couple of years. Maybe the talent has been better, but there's something to be said for that. It's definitely over a couple of football generations, if you will, 5 out of the last 6 meetings. So I think Monte Vista certainly has a big chance. And if they do, they're going to be right back in this league race as really the only team that's kind of alive left. Monte Vista is the one that doesn't have a loss yet, while Mount Miguel does. So a lot on the line for Monte Vista. They played a tough schedule. Maybe they're disappointed with their start, and they can make it all. They could change the whole storyline on Friday night by beating their rival.
Yeah, especially you get the win in what online I've seen, and it's called the Rallies Classic. Excuse me, as I've seen online.
Are they paying you? Are they paying you?
No, it's what I saw online. Our good friend Brett Fisher, he posted some highlights.
Free rallies out of this?
No, you never know. That he posted some highlights because it's been 15 years since that big game, that epic clash of what he called the Checker Classic, and then obviously they turned it into the Rallies Classic.
If I go to the rallies down there on Hamashaw after the game, am I going to be hanging out with players from both teams, like reminiscing what happened in the game?
You never know. You could. I mean,
I might be standing there by myself.
You never know. It's always an interesting. It's Spring Valley. It's a great game, and especially with Jacob Laverdier, JD Laverdier, and a quarterback, and then also Allen, the receiver for Mount Miguel. I think it's going to be a really interesting game because you got Gardner on side of Monte Vista, and then of course, like I said, the Laverdier and Allen out there for Mount Miguel. Yeah. And like you said, it's at Monte Vista. That can be the equalizer because it is home field advantage. It's one of those things that can be taken either way. Throw out the record books, in my opinion, because it's one of those games.
Well, Adam, we're going to talk about Mount Miguel again in just a moment when we get to those last two. We kind of saved our 2 highlight games for last this week. Maybe that's why I screwed us up so bad. But it was a game on Saturday night, and Christian High Patriots. Adam, by my accounts, Christian High Patriots, they did run their little, pass behind the line of scrimmage, but it looked like a handoff each video that I saw. The way the Patriots scored it, they were all rushes. There was one pass thrown by the Patriots. It makes sense to me. I kind of want to get more information. I believe the stats. Christian's very good with their stats, and that's the way they listed it, even though sometimes these have been called passes before and increased the passing stats. There's no doubt that Gabe Krug took off running several times in the game. So they ended up with 476 yards on the ground. In fact, the only pass they threw was intercepted. They had 357 yards combined from junior quarterback Gabe Krug and senior running back Gabe Stein. It was, to me, anticipated to be a matchup between Krug, who has an offer, a Division I offer, against Gunnar Gray, who certainly is attracting attention, especially going to his All-America game at AT&T Stadium. But Christian had a couple of three-score leads late, and hey, if they saw the need to run the whole game, it obviously worked. They ran right through them, around them, and over them. And hey, maybe they took a look at the first play and said, this is what we're going to do all night, because it worked.
Yeah. Well, from what you're saying, because, obviously I wasn't there. I just saw a little bit of the highlights. It sounded like Christian had a pretty good lead, it sounds like. And then University City behind Gunnar Gray attempted to make the comeback. It's got to be disappointing for University City because, such high hopes for them, expectations going into the season with them, especially with Gunnar Gray. He's having a pretty good season so far. But just, the record wise, it's just disappointing.
And here's a team, Christian, that, is certainly known that they can throw the ball a little bit when they want, or dictate a game plan to work around whatever they see fit against the defense. And they decided they owned such an advantage moving University City around that they would just run the ball every play. It's a great strategy when it works, because you lessen the chance for turnovers. You don't want to give it back to a guy like Gunnar Gray too many times in a football game. You see what happened. It was still 42-35 through it all. And Christian held 3 touchdown leads twice in the second half. So, you talk about, the disappointment of the Centurions. Skip Walltower caught a 2-yard touchdown pass. Another guy having a good year for University City, the former Grossmont foothiller. We talk about the success Grossmont's having right now, certainly. But anyway, a good night out there for the Christian Patriots. Christian Salacup, he had an interception in the end zone for Christian, and that turned out to be a pretty big play in the end. That was in the second half. That kept the score at the time 28-12. He also rushed 7 times for 99 yards, including a 54-yarder in the first quarter. So good performance for the Patriots, getting that league win. All right, Adam. Well, I was out at this game, and Santana got that big win over Mount Miguel, and it made it look a lot easier than I thought it would be. I thought maybe Mount Miguel would be able to trade scores a little bit, and they kind of did early, but Santana still led in the game 14-0 in a pretty quick time. End up really kind of blowing them out at the end.
Yeah, when you and I talked about this game earlier in the week, I had expressed Bonnie, you there? Oh, all right. I had expressed concern about the speed of Mount Miguel and whether or not Santana was going to be able to keep up with that, and what they could do to contain that speed. And Coach Pat Kelly obviously had a game plan for the defense, and obviously, for the first time all year, they kept Jaheim Allen Pompey out of the end zone. He did not score, so that was a first on the season. Yeah, he had his yards, but he didn't have as many. 11. He caught 11 passes for 112 yards. And J.D. Laverdier was 18 of 35 for 228 yards and a touchdown. But like you said, Santana, and I even saw it, following along on Twitter. They jumped out to that 14-0 lead. And then the defense obviously, stepped up huge. I mean, they picked Laverdier off at least, I believe it was four times. I believe, Temple had a crazy game, counted for 7 touchdowns. He was pretty efficient at 14 of 22 with 310 yards and 3 touchdowns, rushing 10 times for 55 and 4 touchdowns. They accumulated 502 total yards of offense. And then Brooks Mutah, who I thought would have a, if there was going to be a somewhat of an X factor in this game, it was going to be him and Nathan Hughes. In order, we talked about this, we've talked about this in other games. In order to keep, the other team off the field, what do you have to do? Ball control. And Mutah, he carried the ball 13 times for 100 yards, and then also he caught 4 passes for 86. Again, so overall it was a team effort, and Santana did what they did.
Yeah, big night. You mentioned for those guys, Adams, but I will mention that Jaheim Allen Pompey, right now his statistics have him ranked among the leaders in the entire nation. I believe he's second in reception yards, is it, in the entire nation?
I believe so, yes.
So he still racked up some big numbers. Didn't find the end zone. Tough game this week. We talked about Miguel going to play Monte Vista. They'll obviously need to win that one.
Yes, that turns out now to be a pretty important game, because if Mount Miguel can somehow pull off, if they can pull off the upset, they'll be 1-1. Monte Vista will be 0-1, and they theoretically they'll still have a chance for a league title of a possible 2-way, 3-way, if some stuff were to were to happen and whatnot.
Well, that would come into play in the other game this week. I mean, West Hills and Santana.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to discuss that at all.
Oh yeah, we'll discuss that. Yeah, of course Santana. Like you said, they have their big game coming up, the 30th anniversary of the Battle of Santee, aka the Mayor's Cup. Mayor's Cup game.
Right? You tell me.
What's that?
You're telling me, is it 30 or 29, right? It's 22-8, right?
Well, it'd be the 30th because they started in 1989.
Was there a tie in there or something?
Not that I saw on the scores. But yeah,
7 in a row.
Yeah, West Hills has won 7 in a row. Yeah. Santana hasn't beaten them since 2011, despite 2015 through 2016 having better teams. I'm not saying it's just a weird game, okay? Kooky things happen. West Hills in that 2015 game goes up 35 to 7 or 14 or whatever it was at the half. I mean, they just blitzed Santana at West Hills in that first half. Second half, Santana, they made their whatever they did, made the adjustments in the locker room, and it was, we're playing a game now. They turned the light switch on, and they got they made a blitz of their own, and they were on the cusp of possibly pulling the getting the ball back and possibly stealing that game when the it was 4th and like 2 or 3 or whatever it was, and Broomhill, I think the running back's name was at the time for West Hills.
Taj Broomfield.
Yeah, Taj Broomfield. Sorry about that. He took the handoff and he fumbled it and he kicked it, or it got kicked, and it went past the first down marker out of bounds. It's like, what the heck? Unfortunately, there's no holy roller play. If you're not, if, people aren't keen on that. The Oakland Raiders beating the San Diego Chargers in San Diego on Dave Casper picking up the kicked ball for the touchdown, which shouldn't have been allowed, and they called it the holy roller play. Casper to yeah. Anyways,
Mark
so
Van Egan, I think. Mark Van
yeah,
Egan, I think. And,
yeah. So back to the West. They called first down, and I'm like, wait a minute. But then, of course, like I said, there's no holy roller play. West Hills got the break. They ended up winning 42-35 or whatever the crazy score was. And then in 2016 at Santana, the year the Sultans ended up going to Southwestern College in the Division IV championship. They had the better team on paper. They were favored, and what do? West Hills jumps out to a 14-0 lead thanks to a pick six and another score, and it was just on from there. It's just weird stuff happens. Casey Ash, he does a really good job getting those kids, getting his guys ready to play the game against Santana. Because that trophy,
don't make any mistakes at all. I mean,
no, they really don't. I mean, last year, I don't know if you were at that game, but it was a 14-7 game. I couldn't believe it. Because to be honest with you, Monte, Santana had no business being in that game last year. They just didn't, without their starting quarterback because Temple was hurt. It could have been 21-7, but because Gauthier had caught a pass from Jordan Young, and it was called back on a penalty holding or something like that.
Drew got a quarterback a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, but so that score got called back, and like I said, it ended up being 14-7. Santana, they just dug down deep defensively, and so who knows what's going to happen in this game? Like you said, the computers obviously have Santana favored in this game. I haven't seen what the spread is or whatever, or what the predicted score is. But it's one of those ones. It's kind of like when UCLA plays USC, throw out the record books because you just don't know that both teams, they get up and to play each other.
Well, right. You're never sure of a switch of power between rival programs, if you want to call them that. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of a sudden, it kind of bites you a little bit that West Hills has been saying for these several years, and maybe, admittedly, because maybe El Cap has been a better challenge for them since they've owned the Mayor's Cup so steadily. So when you start dismissing one team as a rival and then all of a sudden you're an underdog, well, at least it provides you with the extra motivation necessary that they might need in this game, considering they are, first of all, down the road, and they're an underdog. So they're going to need something. First of all, they're going to need not to make any turnovers, which they're very good at doing, trying to shorten up the game a little bit against a Santana team that's probably willing to battle you and throw with you on the run, with you on the run a little bit until they need the pass.
Yes.
More dynamic passing-wise. But West Hills' defense is underrated, I think, at this point. But Santana's defense has been spectacular against the comparable competition.
Well, I'll tell you what. That game against the Burner Cup game this year, which obviously was a 24-14 win for the Wolfpack. Quentin London, the defensive coordinator for West Hills, had a phenomenal game plan for against the Vaqueros. Because the Vaqueros were at that time were putting up 40 plus points a game, and they were coming off the bye, and so was West Hills, obviously, and so obviously Coach London had a game plan and they executed it because that's what they do. That's what West Hills does. They execute the plan, whatever that may be. And like I said, they had the 100-yard pick six by Stephen Christini, which basically sealed the game. And we'll lucky bounce, because recovering that fumble, that El Cap could have recovered and potentially held on. But and I think Coach London's going to have another incredible game plan, and it's going to be how last week I talked about how it was the chess match between Pat Kelly and Troy Starr, Mount Miguel. Well, I think it's going to be another chess match, this time with more on the line, as you call it, because West Hills has already got a cup. They got the Burner Cup. If they win this one, they got two cups. They got all the momentum. So I mean, it's going to be an exciting game. It's going to be standing room only. You're going to have over 50% of Santee at the game, I think. So bring your popcorn, get there early because there's going to be limited seating, heavy traffic. There's a water polo game or something going on. So, whose smart idea was scheduling a water polo game the same night as the biggest game of the year? They've done that the last couple years now, but besides that, it's going to be a entertaining game out at Santee Community Stadium. So come on out.
I think West Hill does match up in the secondary, and if they're with Klingerman, basically with Klingerman, with both of them, with Christini. I mean, I think the speed of West Hills on the outside can match up with some of the Sultan speed. It's just a matter of how dynamic can West Hills get if they need to keep up a little bit, and how strong is Santana in the trenches against a pretty strong West Hills team. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's where the advantage lies. I don't know, but that's up for West Hills to prove, I think, in that game. And like I said, I think the history kind of gives them some confidence. They can
absolutely.
Say, hey, it doesn't matter which version of the Wolfpack we're throwing out there. We're the Wolfpack, and we own this series.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So well, that's why we have you on. I mean, talk me off the ledge a little bit, because we could go on about that game for a while, I think. But you went to the big game. We saving the best here kind of for last. And I think it was a very entertaining game. Don't let that score fool you. Maybe it wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing game. I think it might have been to Steele Canyon and their fans. They really kind of did do a good job, really kind of a job where they controlled the game, but the Eagles weren't out of it by any stretch almost for the entirety. So maybe the Eagles were playing catch up, but I think they showed their fortitude a little bit by keeping it within a touchdown in the fourth quarter with a chance at home to beat an undefeated team. So great game. Steele Canyon wins it by 2 touchdowns, kind of a fluky little extra touchdown there at the end. The Eagles were trying to go for it, gun it a little bit, and got caught up trying to, extend a play, stretch some yardage, and they picked it up and ran it back in for a touchdown in the final minute or two.
To be honest with this game, the score actually should have been a lot worse, actually. Could have been. Steele Canyon at the half was only up 21-7. Could have been 35-7. Steele Canyon missed on a couple opportunities, and which kept Granite in the game. And just stupid penalties. Even though there wasn't that many in the game, but there were stupid penalties at the most inopportune times for the Cougars. And it was one, like I said, it was one of those deals that who came out and did what first. And you know, it's weird because talking to a couple other pundits, Steele, excuse me, Granite Hills, the knock on them is that they come out flat in the big game, and I don't 100% agree with that, but there's going to come a time when they're going to have to, win the big, win that game and win the big game,
Not going to win many games, giving up 3 touchdowns in the first quarter.
No, absolutely not. And Granite had their opportunities too. Don't get me wrong. Justice McComb kind of overthrew a couple of the receivers a couple times, which had they been caught, they would have been off to the races, mind you. So it could have been 35-21, 35-28 at half. If everything had, if they all had scored on their opportunities. The defenses obviously came up big because it was 21-13 for the longest, for a long time. Yeah. And then, Steele Canyon, like you said, scored that fluke touchdown there, with under a minute, as Granite was trying to, make a comeback. The scoop and score. So yeah. Jeremy Mendez Gall was 7 of 12 for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the 70-yarder to Chris Carter in that first half. They're 6-0 for the first time in school history. So obviously it's something that their CIF and state championship team didn't accomplish a couple years ago. Defensively. Rugby Morse had 3 sacks. Colton Guerrero had 7 tackles, a sack, and an interception, and a forced fumble. That James Bradle returned the 20 yards for the touchdown, which ended up being the final score for the Cougars. So talking to Coach Longerbone after the game, both teams, they come to play. And hats off to both teams because, like I said, it was an entertaining game. Obviously, not the miracle, the miracle on Madison or the last-second touchdown of last year, but still an entertaining game.
Adam, I'll mention some of those Cougar defensive players. Of course, Biamu Ayu Morse had 3 sacks. And junior teammate Colton Guerrero had 7 tackles, a sack, an interception, and a forced fumble. That fumble that we talked about, that James Bradle was the guy who picked it up and ran it in 20 yards for that game-clinching score, finally sent me on the way to the exits to beat that massive crowd. Man, they were parked all up and down Madison Avenue, down all the side streets, the cars as far as you could see.
Yes, there was a big crowd, but I was a little disappointed. I thought it could have been bigger. It wasn't standing room only like I thought it was going to be. But there was a decent crowd. The parking lot obviously was jam-packed, and they were all on the street outside. They were parked up and down. But I really thought, because 2 years ago in that regular season game where the late great Will Burton caught the what I coined the miracle on Madison, it was standing room only. You couldn't move around the sidelines. Myself and Ruben Pena from a couple years ago, we were trying to maneuver our way between everybody on the stupid sidelines. But no, like I said, it was a good sized crowd. Could have been better, but you know what? That's okay. It was an entertaining game.
Adam, I want to go back and look because I those 2 games that Will Burton played in, and I saw the play that Zach Burton had, and I want to talk about him lumbering those 42 yards. I mean, no one was going to catch him. I don't care how fast he was running. He was so wide open. But, you know, I just want to go back if I can, and I'm going to look and see if there wasn't exactly that same play for one of a touchdown in one of those two games that Will Burton caught a pass wide open that nobody was covering him and you know, I might be just dreaming about that, but I don't know. I'm going to go back and see if I can see if that really did happen. It might be too late now because the story's gone, but Granite Hills, they, you know, did a pretty good job. Carlos De Leon, he's the one that caught the touchdown pass in the fourth quarter, closed the lead 20-13. There were still 7.5 minutes left when that had happened, Adam. So nobody really had left the building.
Right.
I think there was drama all the way through. Maybe there was a good job by the Eagle defense. I'm not going to say there was any ineffectiveness, you know, by Steele Canyon. They still, you mentioned, had some nice numbers. The 70-yarder to Chris Carter, that turned out to be a pretty big play right at the start of the game. So,
well,
I just want,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
no,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to add, you know, I fear you're looking at the poll this week, looking at the power rating numbers that are coming out, and you'll see the slow decline of Steele Canyon, despite the fact that they're winning. And if you want to make the argument now, and I don't know how the coaches feel and how the way the split has ended up or what the latest is, I heard that maybe they have actually maybe come to the conclusion that it is going to happen. But if Steele Canyon does go somehow undefeated and it does not make that Final Four, it's going to be because of the games that they had to play against El Capitan and Valhalla. And that's no fault of those teams. That's just the way the numbers shake out. When you have to dip down to play Division III, I know it's hard to schedule. And that's a tough break for those teams that might end up in that 4-team league. But it could cost you in the end. And I'm afraid that that could be what's going to happen here if things don't shake out like the Cougars need to. They might be sitting at number 5, unfortunately, Adam. I'm afraid. I'm no good at math. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, you know, it's obviously it's not like back in the day with the old BCS deal where Coach Mac Brown lobbied politics the Longhorns into the national championship game back in the day. You know, so obviously now it's all computerized and all that. And you got to play who you only got unfortunately you got you play who's on the schedule, and had the conversations with Brian Wilbur, the commissioner of athletics for the district, and we've talked about it with the releaguing and the leaguing and stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's just it will be a shame if they do finish undefeated and they are left out of that four spot, just because how good they are.
And I think that the Final Four, the Open Division, I mean, right now it's a pretty darn good format. I mean, look at how some of those higher echelon teams are beating fellow top 10 opponents. You talk about what Torrey Pines lost to Carlsbad, 40-7. Mission Bay beat Oceanside, 27-0, handily beating these teams that are really just a couple of spots below them in the top 10. So, we got, looks like, 5 pretty stellar teams, and it's going to kind of fall where Carlsbad and Steele Canyon does, and Steele Canyon's going to need that big win, against Helix in order to get in again, I'm afraid. So show. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say it's unless Grossmont jumps up and bites, it's looking like it's going to be the clash of the showdown between Steele Canyon and Helix for that league title. And I think the winner, obviously Helix will be in that top 4, and if Steele, regardless of winning or losing that game, if both teams are undefeated, if Steele Canyon wins, they're in. I think obviously they are. But if they lose, I think it's going to be this, slimmest of margins. I honestly believe that, Moni. that it will be the slimmest of margins when it comes to calculating that final spot.
Yeah, and I would hate for it to be where, I mean, I look at the numbers. I'm kind of looking at them. I'm not sitting here with a calculator. I'm not sitting here with a program. It looks to me kind of like, on the Max Prep's computer that, takes in the margin of victory type of thing, that Steele Canyon could end up fourth there. But in the CIF formula, Steele Canyon could end up fifth. So it might work against the East County there. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just making stuff up to try to get 10 more viewers.
No, I mean, like I said, as long as everything plays itself out, it's going to be a rock and rolling time the rest of the year, man.
If they don't make it a Division I favorite for sure. So, anyways, I hope I didn't screw up the show too bad, and I hope I mentioned, and you mentioned everybody that you wanted to mention that had great games last Friday. I think it might be too hard to go over it, but I think we talked about the big games this week as well: the West Hills, Santana, the Grossmont, Granite Hills, and the Mount Miguel, Monte Vista. Not to slight any of those other ball games. Didn't mention Christian. They're playing at Mira Mesa, which probably is a tougher game than it looks on the schedule. And of course, those are one-sided league games over in the Hills League.
Yeah. One more note on that Grossmont at Granite game. That is the 97.3 FM game of the week, and it will be on the radio.
Okay.
Since Padres baseball is obviously no more. So if you have a radio, be sure to tune that in. Our good friends Braden Soprano and Coach John Quintero will have the call on that game. If you don't have a radio, you can always tune on the radio.com app. So be sure to check that out. Also, it's Granite Hills' homecoming.
Oh, geez.
So that's another extra incentive there.
Oh,
all right,
man. Okay. Well, I was thinking of trying to get maybe a doubleheader going with Grossmont and Granite, West Hills and Santana, but that sounds like a big, crowd over there at Granite Hills, and I don't like big crowds.
They're gonna have all their alumni show up. It's gonna be a hoot and holler and rock and roll of a time there. Granite Hills does an awesome job getting the alumni to come back every year. So if you go over there, you're going to see everybody, the who's who. You're going to know a ton of people over there, Monte, if that's where you end up going, I bet you.
Maybe I'll start there, and then I can sneak out before the fireworks. I just thought, on paper, I mean, that's a tough game to put as your homecoming. I mean, I know that, like I said, Granite Hills, maybe that's where I didn't cover. I kind of screwed up the script a little bit, Adam. Maybe that's where I'll end it. We got a few minutes left. Is that because you didn't answer my question because I screwed up the script so bad. But where did it happen that Grossmont, which did not beat Granite Hills last season on their home field, but somehow because of their success that they've had, Grossmont's had well-earned success, great leadership from Odom and the veterans of Grossmont, somewhere along the line they passed up Granite Hills, and Granite Hills is at home in this game, and they're kind of in a situation where. I don't think I've picked the game yet, and I don't know if I will now, but I don't think you could pin me down on a pick in this game right now. I think I would lean Granite Hills because they're at home, and Grossmont maybe needs to prove themselves in a game like this.
Mm-hmm.
But where did it happen that really there's been nothing in my eyes that Granite Hills, even though I voted Grossmont higher in the poll than Granite Hills, I respect that computer rating that reflects that Granite Hills has passed them somehow, but on the field they kind of have not. That game last year, Granite Hills went in and did a number on them on their home field, on the Hillers' home field.
I think people are enamored with that high-flying offense of the Foothillers because if you go back right after that game, right after they just completely walloped Mater Dei. And at the time, set the all-time single game record for most total offensive yards in that game for San Diego section history. Obviously, it was broken a week later by the Bishops Knights and Tyler Buckner. But after that game, if you saw the social media posts and stuff, everybody was like, "Whoa," and everybody was like, "Oh, where'd they come from?" Like, wow. I just think people got are enamored with that high flying offense, and they kind of went back, crash landed against Madison, obviously, and they did. Have they gone it back on the right track? I mean, granted, they beat Valhalla. Excuse me, and so yeah, I mean, if they can do it against another, if they can do that against a top caliber team like Granite Hills, who has probably one of the most physical defenses in the county with Ethan Bishop, and the rest of the guys, um, Keeley, also, and Milam, uh, then it goes to say that Grossmont, I think, deserves those votes. I'm not saying that they don't, but do you understand my point? I
Well,
just
yeah,
think. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, because I think that if you look at, Grossmont will always have the ability to answer, and I still think the Eagles kind of have questions offensively.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not necessarily with what they can get done. The passing game maybe hasn't been as wide out spread as I maybe would have liked. With maybe Johnson's done very well, but maybe getting Centerberg. But the backs, have they not had the best rushing that they could have? They're going to need to run the ball maybe better in this game to kind of slow Grossmont down a little bit. That'd be the big question for me. I think the Eagles have to. I know Justice can take off running, and he does a good job at that, but they've got to eat some time up, I think.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And it goes back, to that what we talked about with Santana and Mount Miguel, because the speed, Kill's speed is ball control. If Granite Hills can run the ball, not just Justice McComb, but the running backs in general, I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think.
Yeah, and that basically an elimination game for those two teams, especially now. Granite Hills, they're already have the one loss, so that's critical for them. And Grossmont has the big games, the two bigger games, with all due respect, still ahead.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's gonna be interesting is to see if Granite Hills can get the pass rush against Jamie Odom, because if they can get in his face and put pressure on him, that's going to be a huge deal there. Because as you know, he's a totally different quarterback if he doesn't have time, and then compared to when he does have time.
Success, right? Granite Hills had some success against Mendez Gall. They did get in there for some sacks.
Yes, and that's going to be a true another test to see if they can get that pressure on Odom, who has a quick release and he's very efficient.
Yeah, Satberry, I believe he had sacks on, I think, back-to-back drives, or maybe even consecutive plays, if I remember. Again, I didn't get there until, as you know, the last, what was it, 4.5 minutes left in the game. Right. And, it kind of like I just saw the whole game in a little synopsis with what happened at the last couple minutes.
Sure.
And one other thing I'll mention then, we'll keep it on 1 hour, so I got a minute with it. Santana, we talk about respect. They obviously, we talked about the game a little bit, so I just want to go back one more time. But they can earn the respect, and Adam, they have earned the respect really this week. At least 3 or 4 people voted them in the media poll. They definitely got votes. Whether
I mean, if they win this game, like I said, I was explaining it to some people on Twitter. Hey, you got to win these games, because people were like, well, how come nobody's voting for Santana because they're undefeated? I'm like, well, you haven't beaten. Granted, I understand they're playing. You got they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, beating the teams in Division 4, but you got to beat a team like Mount Miguel, your city rival West Hills. If they do that, they'll be 9-0. That's going to be the second best record start in school history. It's gonna. I mean, if they do that, Cal Preps has them at like a 60+% chance of finishing undefeated. So I mean, they're on their way.
Yeah, and even in the Cal Preps rankings, they were 17th. So here's the thing: if Santana, I won't say this. I'll leave it at this. We'll just get off the air. But
sure,
Santana's expected to win all their games. If you go by the power rankings, they'll win the championship. Yahoo! Way to go, Santana! If they do that, I guarantee you, Adam, in the final Union Tribune media poll, they'll be like 6th or 7th in the county.
Absolutely, they'll get votes.
They'll say great year, and they might not even think that they can beat some of those teams that are finished in the top 10, but they will be rewarded for their accomplishment with that type of accolade for sure. And I think that their computer ranking will also approach the top 10 in the county.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great show, brother. I screwed it up. I owe you one. You know where you're going this week or no?
What's that?
You know where you're going?
You're going to the Santana West Hills game, man.
Okay. All right. I knew I could count on you. You've just been waiting for this game. That's why you've been.
Oh, dude, it's the game you mark on the calendar, man. I haven't missed a game in 25 years.
Well, like I said, I mean, you're a Sultan skeptic as much as I'm, critical of my Highlanders. When they lose just one game, I'm going to point out a ton of flaws because I'm a football expert.
It's what we do. It's what we do, Monte. It's why we love this game. And, talking to everybody, they understand why we say what we say. There's no ill will. Because I had a couple of the people that was explaining, and they're like, you make a good point.
No, the Sultans know the pressure that's on them this week. Maybe they're relaxed. Maybe they can take solace in the fact that they are expected to beat this team finally. But like you said, because of the rivalry, the coaches aren't going to let them think that. First of all, they're going to write. I'd write on the board, 7 straight wins. Give them all kinds of storylines that they would have to believe. Because
absolutely,
and we see it happen in the rivalry game. So, all right, enjoy that game, and I'll see you next week. I'll work on this script. All right, Adam. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Monte.